You think sauces are harmless flavor boosters? Just a splash of taste on your plate. But what they don't tell you is how many popular American brands are loaded with hidden sugar, sodium, preservatives, and even chemicals banned in other countries. For seniors with blood pressure, kidney, or heart concerns, one wrong bottle could trigger serious health issues. Today, we reveal 9 sauces to avoid and 2 that are actually safe. Start off with number 9. We have Heinz ketchup. You grab the ketchup bottle because it's the default. Burgers, eggs, fries. It looks safe. It tastes familiar. Then you check the label, and the small print hits. Many U.S. ketchup formulas still use high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup as the primary sweetener. That matters because HFC adds extra refined sugar to a meal that someone on diabetes meds or watching blood pressure doesn't need. In the U.S., Heinz's standard recipe lists corn syrup/HFS on the ingredients for some products sold here, while alternative Simply Heinz or reduced sugar lines explicitly remove HFCS. So don't assume the bottle at the store is the no HFCS kind. Numbers that matter? A single tablespoon of standard U.S. ketchup can contain about 4 grams of sugar and approximately 160 milligrams of sodium. That sodium adds up fast. 2 tablespoons on a sandwich and a side of fries is 320 milligrams of sodium before you've eaten anything else. For seniors on a 1,500 milligram sodium target, one heavily dressed meal can eat a large portion of that allowance. Sugar matters too. That high fructose corn syrup spike affects blood sugar and interacts with diabetes medication timing. There's a handling angle too. Large manufacturers produce multiple SKU versions. Regular, reduced sugar, no HFCS markets, like some Canadian lines. And sometimes local stores stock older inventory or regional formulations. That means in practice, you can buy the same brand and get different ingredients depending on country or even retail region. If you're shopping for a senior, check the ingredient line. If it lists high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup, put it back and hunt for the no HFCS or reduced sugar bottle. Think just a squirt, but that squirt can be a sugar and sodium multiplier. If your parent is on insulin or an ACE inhibitor, that extra sugar and salt matter more than you think. Do you use ketchup on everything or only on crisis food, like burned toast? Name your guilty ketchup dish below, and whether you check the ingredient label. Heinz is nostalgic and convenient, but the US versions often hide high amounts of refined sugar. For seniors who need stable blood sugar and low sodium, the right bottle is the one that explicitly says, no high fructose corn syrup. Don't assume the label art equals a safe product. At number 8, Hidden Valley Ranch. Ranch dressing feels like comfort. It turns a plate of bland into a meal and a bowl of veggies into a snack. That comfort is exactly what makes Hidden Valley risky for seniors. One serving of Hidden Valley Original Ranch contains about 260 milligrams of sodium and a full fat calorie load, more than some expect for a salad dressing. If you dunk a salad and use a full serving, you've already added a fifth of a 1,500 milligram sodium day in one move. On top of the nutrition math, Hidden Valley has faced label problems in some markets. In 2023, Canadian authorities recalled specific large-format Hidden Valley home-style products for undeclared mustard, a real danger for people with mustard allergies and an example that even big brands can slip on labeling. Undeclared allergens, preservative lists, and regional formula differences make this category harder to trust for someone who needs predictable, minimal ingredient food. Why the jar smells fine but still matters. Ranch formulas typically include stabilizers, thickeners, and natural flavor blocks to keep texture stable on supermarket shelves. Those ingredients raise the odds of unexpected additives that interact with medications or add hidden sodium. For seniors, a dressing that looks harmless can be the daily sodium leak that shifts blood pressure control. If the label lists natural flavor or long polysaccharide gums, and you're buying for someone with strict dietary needs, treat that bottle like an unlabeled medicine. A single dressing-soaked salad can be worse for sodium than a small fast food sandwich. It's the sneaky little splashes that add up over the week and show on the clinic monitor. Ranch on everything. Yay or nay? If you still use ranch, do you buy the soda versions or full fat? Tell us which one keeps your parent actually eating their veggies. Hidden Valley is a convenience icon, but that convenience brings a sodium and additive cost seniors often can't afford. If you grab ranch, use a teaspoon, check for no added salt, or switch to a yogurt-based homemade mix, you'll keep sodium down and the salad edible. Arriving at number 7, we have got Frank's Red Hot. You think hot sauce is harmless because you only use a dash. But hot sauces have a patchy testing history for heavy metals and contamination. and that matters for seniors. Several academic studies and independent tests found detectable lead in many hot sauces, and in a handful of imported brands levels exceeded the FDA action level used for candies. The presence and level of lead varied a lot between brands and even between production lots. That means hot sauce is a category where a trusted label doesn't guarantee a problem won't appear in a particular bottle. Frank's Red Hot itself was tied to a 2021 voluntary recall of a Frank's branded seasoning as part of a McCormick recall linked to possible salmonella contamination. While that seasoning recall is not the same as the original hot sauce bottle, it shows large spice and hot sauce product lines can be affected by microbiological or cross-contamination issues. Add in the lead testing studies, and the category looks riskier for older adults who clear metals and toxins more slowly. Sodium. Note: Frank's and most hot sauces often have less sodium per teaspoon than ketchup or soy sauce, but people don't use just a teaspoon every time. If a senior eats a hot item several times a week and pairs it with processed foods, the cumulative salt and any heavy metal exposure matter. For a kidney patient or someone on chelators, diuretics, repeated low-level exposure could matter more than a one-time dash. A dash is only safe if the bottle you reach for hasn't had a bad lot. Since lead and other contaminants can show up unevenly, brand trust alone isn't enough. You need traceability, recent testing, or to rotate products. Do you sprinkle hot sauce on everything or reserve it for special spice days? Tell us your go-to brand and whether you'd swap it for a tested low-metal option. Frank's is a classic and many people use it safely. But the class of hot sauces has a documented history of detectable lead and occasional microbiological recalls. So if you're shopping for a senior, choose tested, traceable bottles or use plain chilies and vinegar instead. Transitioning to number 6, we are introduced to Kraft BBQ Sauce. Barbecue sauce is the fast shortcut to crowd-pleasing flavor. Sweet Baby Ray's gets a lot of heat for sugar, but Kraft's original BBQ versions are also loaded. Typical nutrition tables show large sugar counts and significant sodium per serving. 1 tablespoon of many commercial BBQ sauces delivers several grams of sugar and a notable sodium portion, enough that a sauced chicken breast can move a senior's meal from safe to problematic in one serving. Recall and labeling history. Barbecue and related sauces have been the subject of recalls for undeclared ingredients in the past. For instance, a Canadian recall for bullseye/Kraft label items over undeclared mustard. And food makers sometimes reformulate regionally. That means ingredient differences by country, plus occasional label or packing errors, create a risk for anyone with allergies or medication interactions. For seniors, the more complicated the ingredient list, the harder it is to predict interactions with sodium-sensitive medications. Why sugar and sodium matter together. Sugar spikes complicate diabetes medication timing and insulin dosing. Sodium spikes blunt antihypertensives and increase fluid retention. A single heavily sauced meal, ribs with a double glaze of Kraft BBQA, can easily add 15 to 30 grams of sugar and several hundred milligrams of sodium to a plate. That can make a day's diet look very different at the clinic. The smell of sweet smoke tricks you into thinking it's home. But that sticky gloss hides sugars and salt that your parents' blood pressure and blood glucose can't afford. Are you team sauce everything or team dry rub only? If you sauce, do you use a light brush or drown it like a glaze? Debate. Kraft BBQ is familiar and tasty, but it's an easy way to wipe out a sodium or sugar budget in one sitting. If you're buying for someone with heart, blood pressure, or blood sugar issues, treat commercial BBQ sauce as an occasional treat, not a daily marinade. Number 5 brings us to Lea Perrins Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire is that invisible seasoning that makes chili, stews, and marinades taste authentic. One tiny splash and your dinner looks chef-made. That same invisible boost is exactly why Lea Perrins can quietly hurt people who have to watch salt, sugar, or hidden ingredients. The numbers matter first. Standard Lea Perrins. Worcestershire runs about 65 milligrams sodium per teaspoon, roughly 195 milligrams per tablespoon, and tops out to approximately 1,300 milligrams per 100 grams on some nutrition tables, the equivalent of a serious salt packet if you use several tablespoons in a recipe. For seniors on a 1,500 milligram sodium target, 3 tablespoons mixed into a pot can already be half their daily allowance. If your relative is on an ACE inhibitor or a diuretic, that hidden sodium shows up at the clinic as a climb in readings. That's not the only issue. Worcestershire is a fermented complex sauce with anchovies, tamarind, molasses, and vinegar. Tasty, but problematic when ingredients or labels change. Earlier this year, USDA/FSIS reports and press coverage documented cases where producers switched the type of Worcestershire used in jerky and other products and failed to declare anchovy/anchovy-derived ingredients, which forced recalls because people with fish allergies had no warning. That's a real problem. An ingredient swap at the plant can make a safe jar suddenly dangerous for someone with an allergy. Then there's the reduced sodium nuance. Lea Perrins sells a reduced sodium SKU with about 30% less sodium than the original. That's useful, but many shoppers don't notice the difference at the shelf. Stores stock different SKUs in bulk, and regional formulations vary. You might think you're buying the gentler bottle, but pick up the regular one that lists corn syrup or higher sodium. For caregivers shopping for seniors, that label detail is the whole point. Read the ingredient line, not the logo. Quality and handling risks exist too. Because Worcestershire is acidic, it's fairly shelf-stable. But if a manufacturer reformulates or sources ingredients differently, flavor and preservative profiles can shift. That matters for older adults who take multiple meds because additives and stabilizers, listed as natural flavor or polysaccharide gums, sometimes interact with drugs or add hidden sodium equivalents. If you smell an off-fermented note or the bottle looks cloudy, don't assume it's just complex flavor. Keep the lot code, photo the label, and return it. A few tablespoons for flavor can turn into a sodium and allergen bomb for the person you care for, and by the time a problem shows up, you're in the ER with a reaction or a pressure spike that started at the dinner table. Do you always grab the same Worcestershire bottle, or do you check the label each time? Tell us one time a familiar bottle surprised you. Lea Perrins can be a great flavor hack, but for seniors, it needs to be used like a prescription, measured, labeled, and checked. If you're cooking for someone who must limit sodium or has allergies, switch to the reduced sodium bottle or skip it entirely. At number 4 is Sweet Baby Ray's BBQ Sauce. Barbecue sauce sells nostalgia, backyard, smoke, childhood. Sweet Baby Ray's delivers that glossy, thick sweetness. The problem is how much sugar and salt come with that gloss. Look at the math. 1 tablespoon of Sweet Baby Ray's original contains roughly 7 grams sugar and meaningful sodium in the single-digit hundreds per multiple tablespoon serving. A properly sauced chicken breast with 3 tablespoons can add 20-plus grams of sugar and several hundred milligrams of sodium to a meal. For seniors with diabetes or sodium limits, 1 light brush can become a full sugar and sodium spike. There's also the packaging and contamination angle. Consumer threads and some social posts have flagged bottles with plastic shavings, crowns that pop, or odd floating particles, signs of production or packaging failures. A plastic fragment in a hot glaze might not injure an adult, but for an older person with dentures or swallowing problems, it's a real hazard. Even more important, sticky sauces linger on hands and utensils, increasing inadvertent exposure to sugar and salt across meals. Recalls and label errors have affected barbecue lines across brands. While Sweet Baby Ray's has not had a sweeping salmonella recall in recent years, the wider category has seen undeclared allergen and contamination actions, which means the industry's supply chains and plant sanitation practices are under pressure. When companies reformulate or source cheaper syrups, HFCS levels or preservative load can rise without an obvious label flag. For seniors on multiple meds, that hidden chemistry matters. Practical serving risk. People assume BBQ is just a topping, but a single double-glazed rack of ribs or a sauced sandwich doubles the sugar and sodium of the meal. If you're managing blood sugar with oral meds or insulin, timing matters. A sudden sugar hit after medication can cause mismatched insulin activity and hypoglycemia later. If you're managing blood pressure, that same plate produces a sodium jump that blunts medication effectiveness. That smoky sweet gloss tastes like summer, but for an older person, it can be a week's worth of sugar in one plate. Do you go no sauce when you're watching sugar, or just use the no sugar varieties? Drop your trick for keeping flavor without the spike. Sweet Baby Ray's is delicious for a weekend plate. For daily meals for seniors, treat it like dessert, occasional, measured, and only when you can factor sugar and sodium into the rest of the day. At number 3, we have French's classic yellow mustard. Mustard gets a reputation as the safe condiment. Low calories, little sugar, and the bright yellow squeeze that Americans grew up on. That generalization is true, but it hides a few real pitfalls seniors should watch for. Nutrition first. French's Classic. Yellow mustard is low calorie and low sugar, and standard data give approximately 55 milligrams sodium per teaspoon. That's lower than many sauces, but it's not zero. And if someone slathers a sandwich with multiple tablespoons, the sodium adds up. For seniors who use multiple condiments across a day, mustard becomes another contributor to cumulative salt intake. The bigger issue is variability and hidden additives. French's advertises a clean label on its classic yellow product, but private label and regional mustard variants may include stabilizers, added sugar, or colorants. Over the last couple of years, there were consumer reports and forum threads noting taste and texture changes in some French's batches. Customers reported chemical or off taste that led to manufacturers requesting bottles be sent back for investigation. That kind of batch variability matters when a senior eats the same brand daily. A single new preservative or stabilizer can affect digestion or interact subtly with medication. Allergen and formulation risk is small but real. Mustard is itself an allergen for some people, and changes in production or cross-contact in plants have led to undeclared traces in other categories in the past. Seniors with multiple allergies or sensitivities should treat any new jar as try a teaspoon first, rather than assuming long-term safety. Mustard is the safe condiment that mostly is safe, but small changes in batch formulation or heavy use across the day can turn it into a steady sodium drip. Mustard on eggs. Yes or no? And do you use French's or go spicy for more flavor with less volume? French's Classic is one of the better low-risk condiments, but don't give it a free pass. Measure, watch batch changes, and don't let a steady squeeze add a slow-burn sodium load to your relative's diet. Number 2 is Tabasco Original Sauce. Tabasco reads like a safety valve. Vinegar, pepper, salt, simple ingredients, thin consistency. The label backs that up. Tabasco lists approximately 35 milligrams sodium per teaspoon and has minimal calories and sugar. On the surface, it's an excellent low-sodium way to boost flavor, but the category has shown concrete safety hiccups you can't ignore. Start with contamination and recalls. In 2024 to 2025, some jurisdictions flagged batches of Tabasco exported to certain markets for sulfur dioxide or labeling issues and issued recalls, not because the core product is inherently dangerous, but because bottling, labeling, or regional processing steps sometimes vary and export lots can be subject to different rules. When a product flows through multiple markets and plants, cap integrity and batch testing matter. A single bottling line failure can put contaminated or mislabeled bottles on shelves. Then there's the lead and heavy metal angle. Academic studies testing a range of hot sauces have found detectable lead in a subset of brands and batches, particularly some imported products. The UNLV study is often cited for finding several hot sauces with lead above 0.1 parts per million. Tabasco's U.S. domestic production generally tests clean, but hot sauce as a category is uneven, and lead accumulates over time in older adults, especially those with reduced renal clearance. That means repeated use of any bottle with elevated metals matters. Microbiology and sealing are real concerns too. Hot sauces are acidic and generally self-protecting, but production errors have triggered recalls across the category. If a bottle cap shows leakage, foaming, bulging, or a broken safety ring, don't use it. These are red flags that a supposedly shelf-stable bottle is no longer stable. In 2025, several hot sauce recalls around labeling or sulfite issues show that even large brands can be swept up when a supplier or plant problem appears. Tabasco can be a low-sodium ally, but only if you buy sealed, traceable bottles and avoid daily heavy use unless you know the lot's test history. Does hot sauce live on your table? If so, how often do you replace the bottle after opening? Monthly, quarterly, or when it looks empty? Tabasco is a great tool for flavor without salt. But don't let thin and vinegary fool you into buying a bad lot. Check seals, buy from reputable retailers, and rotate brands so no single bottle becomes a steady source of metals or contamination. Finally, at number 1, we have Kraft Mayonnaise. You reach for the familiar jar because it's been on the table since childhood. Smooth, creamy, promises no fuss. That comfort is exactly what makes Kraft Mayonnaise dangerous for older adults who depend on steady vitals. On paper, Kraft Mayo looks harmless, about 70 to 90 calories and roughly 70 to 77 milligrams sodium per tablespoon depending on the SKU. That's not huge by itself, but mayo's real risk isn't calories. It's contamination, shelf life behavior, and the way a little bit adds up across a day. Why contamination matters here. Mayonnaise is an egg oil emulsion. Modern commercial jars use pasteurized eggs and a low pH, so the finished product is usually safe. But the safety chain is only as strong as its weakest link. When egg suppliers, plants, or packing lines fail, the result can be salmonella or other bacterial hazards that are especially dangerous for seniors. In recent years, egg-related salmonella outbreaks and recalls have reminded the industry that eggs remain a recurring food safety vector. Government investigations into egg-borne salmonella and high-profile recalls show why a mayo jar can't be treated like a no-risk item for someone over 65 or with a weakened immune system. Large brand risk is real and measurable. Kraft Heinz, the parent behind many nationwide condiments, has faced multiple recalls across its product lines in recent years. For example, a large 2025 recall of Oscar Mayer turkey bacon over possible listeria contamination. Big companies can move millions of jars. When a plant or supplier slips, problems spread fast. That's not to say every jar is unsafe, but scale amplifies consequences. If a plant has an equipment or supplier failure, dozens of retail lots can be affected before a recall is issued. For seniors, that time gap matters. Practical signs and the quiet hazards. People report spotting odd oil discoloration, off smells under seals, or strange brown films on sealed lids. Consumer forums have numerous posts about mayo gone bad, where the jar looked normal but the seal or top layer was off. A spoiled jar won't always smell dramatic. Some bacterial or chemical problems evade an obvious sensory warning. If anything in the jar looks different from the usual uniform cream, a film, an odd smell, unusual separation, don't chance it. For seniors, a single contaminated spoonful can lead to hospitalization. Medication interactions and sodium math. Mayo's sodium per tablespoon, approximately 70 milligrams, becomes meaningful when a senior uses several condiments, canned soups, or sandwich spreads across a day. Combine a mayo-smeared sandwich, a cup of canned soup, and a pre-made salad, and you can easily double the daily sodium load many cardiologists advise. That sodium fatigue blunts blood pressure meds and can trigger fluid retention for people on diuretics. The medical hit is often gradual, rising readings, swollen ankles, a clinic visit, but it begins on the plate. Worst-case scenarios to picture. A jar contaminated at the plant distributed across stores in many states, eaten by an older adult expecting a normal lunch, symptoms appear 24 to 72 hours later, ER visit. That's not gossip. It's exactly how supply chain slips translate to patient risk. Big brands can make big mistakes. The margin for error is narrower when you feed someone who's frail or on complex meds. If your parent has a jar that looks just a little different, do you throw it or taste test it first? Tell us the last time a familiar product surprised you. Kraft is familiar, cheap, and everywhere, and that exact combination is why a single slip upstream can put many seniors at risk. Check the jar, keep receipts, and don't let brand nostalgia override basic food safety checks. Now, let's turn our attention to the safe picks. Safe pick number 1 is Sir Kensington's classic ketchup. If your chief concern is no high-fructose corn syrup and a short ingredient list, Sir Kensington's classic ketchup was a strong, straightforward choice. Its label explicitly lists organic cane sugar and short, clean ingredients: tomatoes, tomato paste, fair trade cane sugar, distilled vinegar, onions, salt, lime juice concentrate, and a few spices. That matters because HFCS is still the sweetener in many mass-market U.S. ketchups and contributes extra refined sugar to meals where seniors often don't expect it. Sir Kensington's replaced that source of refined fructose with cane sugar and marketed itself around that clarity. Sir Kensington's classic lists about 15 calories, approximately 3 grams total sugar, and roughly 190 milligrams sodium per tablespoon, depending on the product. That sodium per tablespoon is higher than some reduced salt ketchups, so it's not a free pass, but the lack of HFCS and the shorter ingredient list make it easier to understand what you're adding to a senior's meal. Why ingredient clarity matters for seniors. That no HFCS line is more than marketing. HFCS and similar syrups are often cheaper, ultra-processed sugars that manufacturers use to hit a sweetness and texture target at scale. For a person on diabetes meds, insulin timing and sugar load matter in precise ways. Knowing exactly what sugar you're adding, cane sugar versus HFCS, lets caregivers better judge carb counts and insulin needs. That's real, practical control. Important availability note. Sir Kensington's ketchup was officially discontinued in 2023 and is now limited to remaining stock in some stores and online sellers. That doesn't change its formula history. It was a clean label ketchup, but it does change the recommendation. If you find a sealed bottle from a reliable retailer, it's a good pick. Don't assume you'll find new production lots. The brand still sells other condiments, and Unilever brand ownership decisions mean the ketchup supply is finite. If you rely on this bottle for a senior's meals, buy while you can and consider a shelf-stable homemade ketchup recipe as a long-term fallback. How to use it safely for older adults. Use small portions, half to 1 teaspoon rather than a tablespoon, to keep per meal sodium low. Prefer the bottle over packet varieties that vary more in sodium, and pair it with fiber-rich carbs, whole grain bread, to blunt glycemic response. If the person is on insulin, count the 3 grams sugar per tablespoon into the meal carbohydrate total. Finally, check the lot code and expiration date. Discontinued product lines can stay on shelves past ideal turnover windows. Shopping and substitution tips. If you can't find Sir Kensington's, look for ketchups that explicitly say no high fructose corn syrup and show the sugar source. Reduced sodium ketchups or homemade blends give you a near zero risk, and you can control sugar and salt precisely. Did you hoard a bottle of Sir Kensington's when you heard it was discontinued? Guilty or not? Tell us your ketchup survival plan. Sir Kensington's was the neat, readable ketchup option. Clean ingredients, no HFCS, but it's scarce now. If you find a sealed bottle at a trusted store, grab it and learn a simple homemade recipe before the shelves run dry. The second safe option is Primal Kitchen Ranch Dressing. If you want a creamy dressing that avoids seed oils, artificial preservatives, and long mystery ingredient lists, Primal Kitchen's Ranch is one of the cleaner mainstream options. The brand builds its dressing on avocado oil and straightforward components, avocado oil, vinegar, herbs, and cage-free eggs, and emphasizes no xanthan gum, no seed oils, and no artificial flavors. That transparency is helpful when you're shopping for someone on multiple medications. Nutrition facts that matter. Primal Kitchen Ranch lists approximately 110 to 120 calories and roughly 230 to 240 milligrams sodium per 2 tablespoon serving, varies slightly by the dairy-free versus classic SKU. That sodium is not negligible. It's about 10 to 15% of a 1,500 milligram daily target for seniors. But the trade here is ingredient quality and the absence of many stabilizers and preservatives found in mass-market dressings. Compared to a Hidden Valley standard serving, often nearer 260 milligrams sodium per 2 tablespoons, Primal is in the same ballpark for sodium but usually avoids problematic additives. Why the oil and ingredient choices matter clinically. Avocado oil is largely monounsaturated fat, which is heart-friendlier than some industrial seed oils. For seniors monitoring lipids or inflammation, swapping a canola or soybean oil-based dressing for an avocado oil option reduces exposure to highly processed seed oils. Likewise, the lack of thickeners like xanthan gum and avoidance of natural flavor as a catch-all makes the label easier to read and less likely to contain hidden preservatives or emulsifiers that sometimes interfere with sensitive stomachs or interact poorly with some meds. Practical serving advice for caregivers. Measure servings strictly. A 2 tablespoon serving is the label unit. To reduce sodium per portion, dilute a tablespoon of Primal Ranch with plain Greek yogurt or with an equal part of plain water and a squeeze of lemon. You keep the mouthfeel and cut sodium per bite. Use the dressing as a marinade, it stretches farther, or mix it into a big bowl of greens so each forkful has less sodium. For seniors who struggle with dry foods, a little Primal Ranch can improve intake while still letting you control the daily sodium budget. Quality and purchase tips. Buy from a retailer with high turnover. Check Best Buy and lot codes, and prefer the avocado oil variants over flavored or spiced limited editions. If the person you care for is salt sensitive, consider alternating Primal with a homemade oil and vinegar vinaigrette on different days. Do you dilute dressings to save sodium, or do you skip them and risk the plate going uneaten? Share your trick for keeping salads attractive. Primal Kitchen Ranch gives you a creamy, modern base without the long list of mystery additives. But don't forget the label math. 1 spoonful too many and the sodium adds up. Measure, dilute, and rotate. Don't risk your health on bad choices. Subscribe now, and I'll show you what to avoid and what's actually safe every single week.